Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives
From Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene and you're listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. Today we have a guest. Of course, I mentioned earlier we have a guest from the ASEAN People's Forum. He's the chairman of that particular forum, which is a civil society conference. And his name is Jerald Joseph. Of course, later on we will also have the youth section of it. It's a national organizing committee for the ASEAN Youth Forum, Raja Azraff. Anyway, hi Jerald.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So very early in the morning, we are going to talk about human rights.
That's a lot.
So anyway, just to start off, what exactly is the ASEAN People's Forum, when it started?
This forum is a parallel event to the summit. Every year, ASEAN governments hold their meeting amongst head of states. And it moves yearly. So this year's the turn of Malaysia to be the chair. So all heads of states will be meeting in April and November. During the April period, usually NGOs, civil society groups have done a parallel event to meet together to discuss on issues they think they want to influence and tell governments on what to improve on ASEAN. So this is what ASEAN People's Forum basically is.
So you've been telling governments in Southeast Asia since 10 years ago.
Yes, we have.
Anything happened?
That's the tiring part. No? Since 2005, amazingly, it was in Malaysia that it was first held. At that time, it was called the ASEAN Civil Society Conference. At that time, under Tun Badawi's leadership, he said they opened up the space. So 10 years on, every year we've had a statement, a final statement that we give our governments, all governments, and hope that they will listen and pick up some of it and give traction to some of our recommendations.
So this declaration or these statements, is it like something like a Comengo report of what have happened in Southeast Asia?
I think it's both levels. Maybe I can specifically speak more of this year's statement. We have the analysis, which is what needs to change, what's not correct, and all that. So that's there. But the second part is a recommendation, how governments can and should change or include new policies, new thinking, new laws in order to make ASEAN better. That's the bottom line. As we speak, we also put the specific issues and topics of the year. So that's what we've been telling governments year in, year out, of our concerns and issues that affect people on the ground.
This year is in Malaysia, but before we move on to this year's event, last year, can you just give a brief what happened last year? Because according to the media, it was a success. The Myanmar government managed to hold a really interesting ASEAN summit. But on the civil society platform, is it the same thing?
I think Myanmar's team, let's just take the team. The theme that was decided was advancing ASEAN people's solidarity towards sustainable peace, development justice, and democratization. So I think even the theme is a very strong theme, and I think Myanmar as a host, both for the government and the civil society, it's an important theme because the word sustainable peace, which is an important issue there, development, which is important, but the word development justice is important, and democratization, all the issues that is hot for Myanmar, but also hot for ASEAN. So I think from an issue point of focus, that was timely. And ASEAN civil society was excited that it was in Myanmar after the opening up. And Myanmar civil society was really excited that for the first time after many years they could celebrate.
So they have supports from the governments
the government,
in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, what happened was the people came together, 3,000 came together to celebrate themselves, to put the issues forward. And I think along the years, what it's seemingly looking like is like the People's Forum is at the same period of the ASEAN Summit. Some governments may not directly refer to the People's Forum as an official event during the summit. That's your event, this is our event. But from our point of view, we said that what's the point of having a parallel event during the summit if not to talk to governments and to speak of an advocacy agenda. So I think Yangon tried to speak through that platform, bring people together and be loud about that celebration of peace.
And it had a huge crowd as well, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken. 3,000 people
it's the
attended.
biggest ever. I mean, I can't imagine getting that amount of people for an ASEAN event, because normally it's very difficult to get interest on ASEAN, you know. People don't know what's happening in ASEAN. So when we saw 3,000, we say, wow, amazing, you know. But I think many of them also came out to share their feeling of that liberation space that was opening up in Myanmar.
Any issues that were being barred from discussing during the APF I'm talking about?
There was no issues that
or
could...
being interrupted?
Yeah, there no issue that were officially barred from speaking. No one said you cannot talk, but there were difficult issues to bring up. One of it being the Rohingya statelessness issue, you know, because I think for that issue, Myanmar government was overtly sensitive, and there were also some among the people in the forum who tried to stop that discussion. No? But I think generally there was support for the importance of this issue, Rohingya issue, and I think this year in Malaysia, we do also want to continue that space for the discussion.
In Myanmar itself, bringing forward towards Malaysia, is there any standards that Malaysia can somehow raise up?
Oh, okay.
Will you get more than 3,000 people, stuff like that?
I congratulate the Myanmar Organising Committee for bringing so many people. But I am quite sure that the Malaysia event, we never even tried to put such a target. We are hoping that if we get 1,000, we would celebrate and be happy. So I think that's been the number of the last many APF, ranging from 500 to 1,000.
But are you going to do things differently this year?
So it's not the numbers, it's maybe trying different methodologies to see how a People's Forum can work. So on that score, the Malaysian Organising Committee, together with the regional NGOs and NGOs from other countries, since September last year when we started meeting, we had agreed to some changes in the process and the program. Mainly, the first main difference is that to finalize our statement about 3 months in advance, and that was a new thing, because previously the statement is prepared during the forum and it finalized 2 days before the summit, and then it's submitted to heads of state. So our feeling is that governments receive that document but then keep it aside, because in any case it's too late to influence the government's discussion at that period.
But the statement, is it the same year after year, or do you make it into a report where you list down this is what happened this year in terms of human rights violation or issues that are still pending?
Well, one sense to say year in and year out is the same. Sadly, some issues remain on the table because there's been very little progress on issues on development, on peace, on human rights. There have been a little bit of changes here and there, but by and large, many of the civil political rights issues and even now the economic and development justice issues have been seeing very little progress. So on that score, perhaps some of it continues till the same document.
Maybe you should keep a scorecard every year just to keep track how much of the declaration or statement is being followed.
I think that was the realization of the participants in the Myanmar People's Forum. They made a decision there to set up a follow-up committee. So we have a follow-up committee.
It's like a monitoring body.
So they are preparing a report exactly as you suggested. Similar to a scorecard but not so systematic, to try to see how has the statement have some traction or not in the last 12 months. So I think during the People's Forum, that committee will present a brief report on what they think has or has not taken up. But our own general feeling since we met since September is that many of the things in the last 9 years have very little support or gain little momentum. One is because I think that dialogue space, institutionalizing dialogue between civil society and governments, is still very wanting and weak in many ASEAN governments. So because of that, we are seen as outside the door rather than stakeholders inside. And that has, I think, been one of the biggest stumbling blocks in the last 10 years of our
But
engagement.
last year they started this interface meeting with the civil society. But what's your thoughts, or at least the ASEAN People's Forum's stance on that?
Actually, the interface is every time during the summit, they give a half an hour slot to different stakeholders. So for half an hour, they'll meet one rep from each country or two reps from each country. They'll meet for half an hour with the youth, ASEAN youth. They'll meet half an hour with ASEAN business and half an hour with the ASEAN parliamentarian and half an hour with the ASEAN civil society representative. This has been going on since 2005, sometimes successful, sometimes not so successful, sometimes none at all. So you mentioned about Myanmar. So last year in Myanmar during the interface, I think the hope and commitment was that it would happen, that 10 head of states meet with 10 representatives, one each from each country. But finally it did not happen because there were the names that were submitted by civil society organizations, by the countries. Not all names were endorsed by the government. So 3 countries gave their own names, and civil society gave another list. So there was a clash of names. So that collapsed the process.
This is quite confusing, but actually what's the selection process for the representative at the interface meeting on the civil society side?
As I said, there's been so many fashion of each host government tries to ensure a successful interface, and I think civil society wants that interface because, as I said in the beginning, we want to talk to governments, we want to bring up the advocacy agenda to governments to improve. So I think on both sides we have the same agenda, but the process has not been smooth because I think governments have made a decision, and they reaffirmed the decision recently, the senior officials meeting of ASEAN, that it is the government, the foreign ministry, that will submit the name of the civil society representative from each country. So they maintain that decision that it's the government who would submit the name. So on our point saying, well, government submitting a name of civil society, is it really civil society or not? That has been the background. But we know ASEAN is an intergovernmental process. So we are fine that governments can endorse or validate a name. And it's good to know that many governments actually do that. They accept a name submitted from the national NGOs coming together. So like Malaysia, we submitted a name this year. So we're hoping the Malaysian government will endorse it. Indonesia, Thailand, many governments, even last year in Myanmar, 7 governments just endorsed the names that were submitted without any difficulty.
Only the three countries.
Three countries.
And Malaysia is one of it.
Malaysia, unfortunately, was one of it. But Malaysia explained it this time during our meetings that it was caused by some technical miscommunication. So we were wondering, well, maybe we'll give them the benefit of the doubt this time and hope that in this year's APF, it will not happen again. Yeah.
We'll take one short break and we will return with more discussion with Jerald Joseph from the ASEAN People's Forum representative.
Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives
From Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene. You're back again with Jerald Joseph, the chairman of ASEAN People's Forum. So we discussed a lot about the history, the background, and of course, what the interaction or engagement between the government and the ASEAN People's Forum. But what are the issues that are usually being highlighted in the forum itself?
I think the issues broadly is issues of concern for people on the ground, no? And when you say NGO civil society, we actually advocate for many rights belonging to communities, either majority or minority. So when we discussed what are the issues, we did a mapping, just a short mapping. Issues like militarization, violence, armed conflicts, our border issues, South Thailand, South Philippines, Papua, all not resolved. It needs to be resolved. Of course, the South China Sea problem that's bigger than ASEAN. Then the other one is lack of fundamental freedom and human rights violation. I don't think I need to specify that. Even last week I was in Bangkok and the media was asking me about how does ASEAN chairmanship and Sedition Act fall hand in hand. So that's one example of our country. Indonesia now, the death penalty is becoming a very big issue. So I think fundamental freedom, human rights is quite cross-cutting from all countries. We've got so many issues that I think need to be resolved. Some are historical, like the laws from our colonial periods are still used and celebrated to suppress. I think that has to go if we're going to be an ASEAN community. Democracy, quality of democracy and elections.
This is a big question mark.
Exactly. So Malaysia, we've been struggling. I mean, we know the Bersih demand still is on the table. We hope to make, Bersih has been hoping to make progress on that, but sadly not, And then you have a variety of types of government in place in ASEAN, from absolute monarchy to communist regimes to so-called democracy.
These are really big demands. I mean, considering ASEAN is still very much an intergovernmental organization, they can only do so much. I mean, looking at ASEAN Secretariat itself, it has one of the smallest funding compared to large organization like EU.
Correct.
So how much of it is realistic in terms of the demands?
Actually, this question needs to be addressed to governments. It's them who set up an intergovernmental process called ASEAN. And the end of this year, they're going to launch the ASEAN community. I think for Malaysians, maybe we will imagine like an European Union community. Of course, not to that level, but the starting point. So governments realize that that's the only way forward to be a more strong network of countries. And 650 million people is a huge community of people. So on that score, I think you're right. It looks like, wow, is it possible? But my question is that why not? If you have governments who are committed to do it, it can be done. The only question remains is, would governments now change the attitude and mentality from being very insular, or I'm only taking care of my country, I don't bother about another country, and say that this is the region, what happens across border has an impact on me, And I think the best example, the issue of religious extremism and intolerance, that affects anybody and everybody. It doesn't matter where the extremists are grown or born. They can cross borders and create havoc, like we've seen in Kenya recently. So I think that's demand a regional response. So I think it's about time ASEAN governments stop saying that it's new, it will take time, and really say that maybe it is too slow and too long overdue for us to be a region that is respected in the world.
So it has done something. I mean, I have to comment on the formation of the ICHR, or the Human Rights Commission for, the ASEAN Human Rights Intergovernmental Commission. But how much of it is rhetoric, and how much of it is the fact that the government is serious in pushing human rights as part of the pillars of ASEAN?
In our statement that anyone can check online, everything is open to the public. It's www.aseanpeople.org. In our final statement, we address what you are mentioning. We're saying that one of the weakness and lacking, because we had 4 themes in our statement. So one was development justice. So if you want development, everybody wants development, but make sure that it does not impact and take away rights of people. And I spoke about fundamental freedom, democracy, the issue of peace and security, and discrimination and inequalities. This is big issues affecting people. But when we discussed about rights, we did discuss about the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, which is a body which is about 6 years old. Yeah, so similar to like for Malaysians, maybe we will imagine Suhakam, our National Human Rights Commission in Malaysia. So we say, wow, yay. In 2007, we celebrated when we had this, 2009, when this Human Rights Commission was born. Say, wow, that is a new body. This is like the EU, like African Union, wow. But after 6 years, we are sorely disappointed because the bite that a commission needs is not there. And that's why we've put recommendation for more independence. The committee members of, or what we call representatives of the commission, should be like our Suhakam commissioners, independent. Their role and mandate should be something to find out what's happening on human rights, be able to speak about it openly, and give recommendation to government, and also investigate what's wrong. Today, if you have a issue, there's nowhere to write. There's no email address to submit a complaint to Aisha. So this is some of the basic things that any commission should have.
So far, I don't know whether you keep track or not, but how many cases that Aisha has taken over to investigate?
Actually, they don't have a complaints mechanism, so the answer is 0. But from what I hear from friends in the region, officially maybe about 10 to a bit more than 10 have been officially submitted to the secretariat in Jakarta. But there's not even an acknowledgement that, dear sir, madam, thank you, we have received. So no acknowledgement, don't know what's happened, don't know how to take it up. So maybe you go and talk to an individual Aisha rep, he or she may listen to you, but that's not how it's supposed to be.
So Malaysia's chair, Malaysia is the chair for this year's iChair, and of course you have Tan Sri Shafiee Abdullah as the chairman. What was the response on the side of the governments of Southeast Asia to address this probably loophole or weaknesses or limitation?
I think the Aisha was set out with these loopholes quite consciously put in place, because they first of all called it ASEAN Intergovernmental Human Rights Commission, not an independent human rights commission, which is what most like Suhakam. So I think there is a guidelines and what's called the Paris Principles for effective human rights institution, which Aisha has not fallen within. So those loopholes need to be addressed, and I'm saying governments need to realize that the commission is supposed to be an oversight body. It's advisory, but it should be able to go in, walk in, find out something is wrong, and submit the information to the government. Because in the terms of reference, it does say the role and function is to promote and protect human rights. So how can you protect if you can't go in and find out what's happening?
But how can you address human rights violation on a regional scale when a lot of these laws that protect societies on the national scale? What is the mechanism to address the issue on the regional scale?
Actually, in the other regions like Europe and Africa or the Inter-American courts, the system is that you try to exhaust all remedies in your country. So like Malaysia, now we take a case in the court, for example, then it's not working, tak jadi. Then we go to Suhakam and also say, my rights are violated. Like, for example, those who are banned from going to Sarawak. I think Dr. Ambiga has tried to go to court, not successful. I think a group of us have submitted our memorandum to Suhakam.
Not successful.
Nothing's happened so far. So then we are scratching out, what do we do? Of course, we can run to the UN and submit a complaint, but we have something close at home called the ASEAN Intergovernmental Human Rights Commission.
So it's supposed to be like a pressure
it's
body.
the next level to investigate and give recommendation that, okay, all they need to do is say, okay, these cases we've studied from a human rights point of view, it merits some attention, and dear government, please look at it. And so in Europe, Africa, they do give advisory to the government and to the region. So in ASEAN, it's not happening. So the third layer is so it's another avenue. So we try with Malaysia, or Indonesia will try with Indonesia, but in ASEAN we don't have that many Suhakam type institutions. The National Human Rights Institution is only existing in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, I think Cambodia, 4 or 5 at the most, and so the others don't have a National Human Rights Institution, which makes the role and function of Aisha all the more important, because you don't have national, so we can actually go to another body. But when we can't go, we don't know where to go, and the commissioners in the body are not independent because they are appointed by governments, and some of them, I think so far only 2 are really fairly independent, and that's mainly from Indonesia and
the Philippines,
Thailand. Yeah, because they have an open process, and these people don't come from government. One is from civil society, one's from academic, and through that process, and they just function out of the government box. But the others, I think, come from government appointee, and the decisions of what to say or what not to do comes from the government, and that's the difficulty. Government still instruct the commissioners what to do.
So the structure of iChair, or perhaps the umbrella structure of ASEAN itself, that is slowing the process of addressing the human rights concern in this region.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think ASEAN as a whole, well, when they set up the ASEAN Charter, it was a new way of opening up ASEAN to a more rules-based organization. But it's still work in progress. 10 years now, they have this a kind of a vision statement called the Community Pillars. It's the 10 years is ready. End of this year, Prime Minister Najib is supposed to launch the new ASEAN community. But our question is exactly how would Aisha be improved? How would the Commission? How would all the bodies in ASEAN be more effective? Because
Perhaps they are waiting for the civil society to set up a blueprint for it.
I think we have submitted so many documents, we have submitted so many inputs. So I think it's not lack of submission, it's actually how governments would want to move forward. And I think in ASEAN, because of the so-called consensus mechanism that they have a consensus mechanism. I use the word so-called consensus because that consensus mechanism has been an impediment and detrimental to an effective regional grouping.
Perhaps you should have a thematic topic just on that
definitely.
provision.
Yeah, because consensus has really been slowing down the progress. You just need one government to say, I don't agree, and you can't move forward, no? Yeah.
Anyway, we'll take another one short break, and when we return, we will also have a representative from the ASEAN Youth Forum to speak about the people-centered ASEAN. And ASEAN, is it really a rhetoric or it's a reality?
Monday Morning Matters
Perspectives
from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene. We are back again with Jerald Joseph, Chairman of ASEAN People's Forum. And of course, we have Raja Azraff here, National Organising Committee for the ASEAN Youth Forum. In today's topic, as people-centered ASEAN between rhetoric and reality, I guess I have one question. For the next 5 years, for the post-ASEAN 2015, what should be ASEAN's priority? I guess I want to start first with Raja Azraff.
Interesting question that we should look ahead on what we gonna focus on for the post 2015 ASEAN development plan. So for the youth per se, I'd say that we had the Yangon Declaration back in 2014, and what we are trying to focus in ASEAN Youth Forum as well as bring it in the ASEAN People's Forum is the post 2015 development on how we actually wanted to bring forward the issues in the Yangon Declaration together with the ASEAN community initiatives and bring it up further for the post-2015 blueprint for ASEAN youth. So we'd like to see how these issues, the 7 issues in Yangon Declaration that we have.
So that means you are really being strategic here in terms of engaging with the government.
A bit more strategic in a way because what we see that apart from voicing out the issues, we should actually be more strategic in a way, bring up the issues to the stakeholders, to the institutions related to the governments, and that could relate the voices of the civil society from the ground and making it a reality, I believe.
So I guess for the civil society, for the next 5 years, are you going to do the same thing again, or you really want ASEAN to focus on key issues here?
ASEAN is 650 million people, so the key issues to one end may be different from the key issues from another end of ASEAN. So I think we're going to do what is same would be demanding from governments to be better governments. That's something we're going to continue to do. But we also want government to walk the talk. They have a charter that speaks about respect for fundamental freedoms. They have a charter that says we need to abide by international humanitarian law. So the governments realize that they are part of an international community. So we say if you realize that, make it happen. So maybe the next 10 years should be a make it happen focus on for ASEAN community. Because the talk, we've had the talk, now the action which has been wanting. And I think that talk needs to speak specifically to issues of on the ground of different people. For example, building dams.
Mm-hmm.
There is so many dams being proposed both here in Sarawak, in Sabah, in Laos, Cambodia, Thailand. But every country is so concerned because one dam will affect this community or stop the river, affects cross-border. The Mekong Delta is don't know what to do. We are asking why so many 12 dams in Sarawak, 16 in Sabah. Why? What's the need? So that kind of question needs to be addressed regionally. On the issue of agricultural, fishery, environment, what's our minimum standard when we have a community? Does that mean a factory can go over to another country and exploit and have lower standards for emission? Or there's a common standard? Fisheries, how would we now make sure that there's enough fish supply in the region with sustainable fishing? These are the questions that ASEAN as a community must discuss.
But I mean, sorry to interrupt here. Civil society are making a lot of demands, and a lot of it are definitely something that is real and something that is really impacting the local communities in all over Southeast Asia. But how can civil society engage meaningfully and try to somehow nudge ASEAN to focus on key priorities? Because at the same time, ASEAN has all these master plan. I mean, one example is ASEAN connectivity, where one of it would be building a host of dams and to make ASEAN as one of the energy hub. Do you think civil society should have a seat, or at least have some space within any form of ASEAN discourse or ministerial meeting whenever they come out with another blueprint or another master plan?
I think ASEAN has the language of to have consultation with stakeholders in the charter, in the terms of reference even of Aisha. So I think when you say stakeholders, civil society is one stakeholder, like business, like parliamentarian. Make that effective. Open doors, institutionalize the engagement. For example, on the migrant labor forum issues, make people working on the issue your partner. Education ministers meeting, make civil society. At this point, it is really ad hoc. It depends on the chair or personality. So, like for this time, I must say that the engagement of the Malaysian National Organising Committee with Wisma Putra here has been positive. Because we have the Deputy Director General there who's very amenable to open discussion with civil society. So that has made our process easy to work with Wisma Putra Malaysia. But we don't want that to be ad hoc. It must be institutionalized, and they must respect and realize that civil society are their own people, government's own people, having a different thought, maybe more provocative, more critical. But you must open doors because all stakeholders will finally find some way to move forward. On the issue of corruption, how do we stop corruption? If I want to stop corruption in Malaysia, but across the border there's corruption, then the illegal trade of human trafficking easily happens.
You need our own Interpol then.
Yeah, well, I don't know about the own Interpol, but if they are committed, then every police, every agency will have a minimum standard. And then we will say we'll have a zero tolerance to corruption. What an amazing ASEAN it would be. Business will thrive. Business will like doing business in a corruption-free environment because you can guess what's going to happen.
Okay.
We would be happy because we don't need to pay our way out for freedom because people's rights are respected. So I think this is the kind of concept that needs to change from the old style of government knows all to now government and people would manage a nation together.
So in reality, the civil society in ASEAN is not anti-establishment or anti-government. What they are seeking for is a process where there's transparency, good governance, and all the other human rights issues being somehow protected. The same with youth issue, is it?
Yeah, I believe that it should be complemented in between the civil society organization, which is the people, and the government, in terms of bringing up the issues and working out how to actually solve them. Yeah, I agree. Because what we have been seeing now is the anti-establishment kind of thing, but what we're trying to really portray is complementing, negotiating, and bringing up the issue for the better good of the of the people.
Because at the end of the day, governments, just like any other institutions, have their own limitation and needs to be criticized. Of course, they need to have a form of check and balances. But at the end of the day, they are the overarching institution that society are looking forward
Correct.
to
Yeah.
make decision because they have the power.
Exactly. So government comes into being for Malaysia is that we did not force anybody to be government. You put yourselves up to be chosen as government. So once you've won the election and you are government of the day, then with that role comes responsibility and obligations. And the people looks up to the government to fulfill those obligations. So that's the reason why we go to governments and tell them what they have done well or what they have not done well. But that criticism of government is termed as anti-government, and I think that's really a very old notion and a warped concept of handling criticism. I think government should say thank you to us for helping them see what they are not able to see, and say that, hey, thanks for helping me move forward. But I think the feudal system in our culture say that you should not criticize people in power, and that I think needs to go.
And because of you guys, probably the word people-centered ASEAN is not really a government rhetoric, but it should be a reality.
We hope. we hope. Yeah, Prime Minister Najib launches ASEAN must be a people-centered
Yes.
ASEAN, and we say, wow, that's a good phrase. But you're right, it cannot be a rhetoric. If you keep us out, then it's rhetoric. But if you bring us in, then together we are partners for change in ASEAN.
I think the government are listening right now. Anyway, thank you very much, Jerald Joseph and also Raja Azraff for speaking at our radio during ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you. See you again.
Keep on
Bye.
fighting.